Hi everyone, Buzz Lightyear here with Rhyme Signatures, the nerdiest music review this side of insisting that the local law enforcement officer who's trying to get you to see the reality of things is in fact a sad, strange little man who deserves your pity. And today we're going to be doing a review of the new Aviations album, Luminaria. I am always a big fan of seeing certain names crop up time and time again during my routine inspection of the latest and greatest releases emerging into the PROG sphere, as it gives me a wonderful sense of familial recognition and comfort that at the end of the day, we're all just creators trying to make our message felt in the world. So, imagine my delight when I saw in the album credits for this new album from progressive metal sextet Aviations the name James Nowell on the drums, whose name I immediately recognised from the Anchorette, who blew my head off a few months ago with their stunning debut album It All Began With Loneliness. It very much feels like this is Nowell's year, as I distinctly remember the drumming on that album feeling very much next level, and the same is also true on Luminaria. And if James continues on this trend of providing such delightful percussive contributions, then it's looking increasingly likely I'm going to have to revise my favourite metal drummers ever list. But I mentioned earlier that this is a sextet, and indeed there are 5 other members of this rather altogether extraordinary outfit. Completing the remaining duties, we have Adam Benjamin on vocals, Sam Harchick and Eric Palmer on guitars, Richard Blumenthal on piano, and Werner Erkelens on bass. And I can comfortably say as well that there is not a single weak link on this album. In fact, if you were to pressure me into admitting where I think the least impressive performance lies, I think my head would explode in true Scanners fashion due to simply being unable to provide you with an answer. Yes, my esteemed audience, Aviations subscribe to the overtly technical side of the progressive metal freeway, with each and every song on this album being a showcase for the band's extraordinary instrumental and vocal talent, in as many conceivable ways as is inhumanly possible. The drum fills are complex and technical, the guitar riffs and solos flourish with style and virtuosity, the bass lines are fluidic and dynamic, piano keys tinkle with equal parts intimacy and ferocity, and Benjamin's vocals run the gamut from heaven sent to hell's below. There can be no denying to anyone listening to this that each individual part of this album is astonishing from a musicianship perspective, and for anyone who does play any of the instruments that feature on this album, it's hard not to be thoroughly impressed with how proficient the band are with their chosen weapons. However, I have always been a little tiny bit cautious and uncertain of bands or albums that put a major emphasis on the technical side of the music, as it generally brings suffering to a few other key areas, notably that of melody and memorability. Snub as we may the traditional 4/4 verse-chorus structuring of a typical pop music song, one cannot deny the fact that a good pop song is immediately enjoyable, requiring very little effort to find engaging or interesting. Sometimes all I have to say is the name of a pop song and you could probably hum the main hook, or even at times the entire song with very little effort. Blinding Lights by The Weeknd, Faith by George Michael, Uptown Girl by Billy Joel, Wannabe by the Spice Girls. Chances are you remember some or all of those songs just by the name alone. Which honestly brings me to my chief criticism of this album, and I really kind of just want to get this out of the way early so I can focus on what I do love about this, because I do love this album. Now, I've listened to Luminaria about maybe 6 or 7 times the full way through at the time of this review, and honestly, outside of a couple of hooks and the shorter songs, there's not a great deal of truly memorable moments across its runtime. Yes, there's flourishes of brilliance and moments of truly dazzling wizardry amongst the jam-packed runtime, but nothing that has truly stuck with me outside of the time I've spent listening to it. Now, that's not to say that this is necessarily a bad thing, more that this is an album that you can't casually listen to. This is not designed as a record to be passively enjoyed. You really need to focus up, pay attention, get a good pair of headphones, and allow the music to really speak to you. Otherwise, it's simply gonna wash over you and depart your brain space without having left a single indelible mark. This is mostly just a symptom of the kind of music that this is, and I felt it important to bring that to your attention in this review, as approaching this album with the wrong mindset might make you misunderstand the point of it, and I would honestly hate for such a strong album to be overlooked as a result. Right, that's that out the way. Let's get to the good stuff. Good music, great music in fact, should be capable of evoking a complete mood or feeling. I should be able to think of that album and sum up the experience as briefly and succinctly as possible, and Luminaria has achieved precisely that. This album is warm, it is bright, it is hopeful and joyous, a piercing god ray against the darkened cloud cover that is the modern world. Right from the off, with the opening track of Prelude, with its breathy, haunting vocal runs, plaintive acoustic guitars, and ethereal mood setting, the album makes itself known immediately, and it is absolutely gorgeous. We segue into first major track, Cradle, with an explosion of pure feeling and happiness, with a kind of passionate guitar tone that reminds me of the likes of Pliny and language-era Contortionist. The drums roll, the piano swells, and Benjamin's siren-like vocals dance atop the complex smorgasbord below. It's an amazing, scene-stealing track that doesn't so much require your attention as it does demand it. Now, what I enjoy about the early moments of this album as we progress across tracks like Safe House, Legend, and La Jolla is that despite how guitar-heavy the band is, the mixing and production on this record has been done in such a tasteful manner as to allow everyone to be heard equally, but without drowning out everyone else in favour of someone. Neural's drums ring loud and clear, riding the sonic waves and texture created by Blumenthal's piano and Erkelen's bass, sometimes leading the charge of the instrumentation, whilst Harchick and Palmer's guitars serve as backup for a change. It's a great dynamic to the overall sound of the record and gives a feeling of kind of, like a jazz troupe, with everyone rushing forwards, dueling and competing for first place, but ultimately all crossing the finishing line together. Now, I want to talk a little bit about Adam Benjamin. This guy has got some pipes, let me tell you. His pop star-like cleans are soaring, powerful and beautiful, reminding me a little bit of Spencer from Periphery, but with less nose and more throat to his delivery, making for an overall more impactful and impassioned performance. It's in fourth track Legends, though, that he truly opens up the throttle and showcases that he's more than just a pretty major chord, as some truly bone-rattling growls emerge from his throat, completely taking me by surprise, and showing that this bright, shining sunbeam of a record isn't without a teensy bit of darkness and bite. Now make no mistake, this record is 90% cleans and 10% growls, so this shouldn't scare you off if this kind of singing isn't your jam. It mostly serves to add a little bit of textural variety and a bit of edge to an otherwise light and airy experience. The record moves along at a reasonably brisk pace over its 63-minute runtime, and despite each track mostly sticking to the through line established early on, there's no circus-style breakdowns, massive genre switch-ups or otherwise angular musical transitions to be found here, it still manages to feel sufficiently varied and interesting to keep the entire experience worthwhile without ever getting boring, and a lot of that can be attributed to just how complex the instrumentation is, which brings me back to my point about this not being a passive album. To truly enjoy what this has to offer, it requires multiple runs. It wasn't until my fourth listen, I think, with a good pair of cans, that the album started to click for me. This is not a record for instant gratification, and it's clear to me that the band knows and appreciates this, but they haven't compromised on this vision, in order to make music that feels true to themselves. There's never a sense of sacrifice on this album. Every moment feels justified to themselves and deliberate, and consequently, I found it hard to stop listening to this once I'd begun. The more you listen, the more you notice. The more you notice, the more you remember. And then the more you start to understand that this isn't accessible pop music. This isn't written to be ultra-memorable from a purely melodic perspective, but your memory of this album is more about the overall experience and how it manages to perfectly encapsulate a mood. No, you're not going to be humming many choruses, but you'll think back to listening to this and you will feel something. The back half of this record is especially good and really encompasses the point I've just made. Pure, Where We've Been, and especially the final 20 minutes split between penultimate track Coma and closing track Blink are absolutely extraordinary. Yes, I still struggle to pull any individual moments out of my memory, but this is a record that tends to exist in the immediate, and the second that those songs fire up, I get a kind of massive sensory overload as I'm instantly flooded with the feelings that these songs have invoked in me, and I become lost to the moment. To try and describe each individual track on Luminaria is an exercise in futility, I'll be honest with you, as this record is an experiential one that has sacrificed hooks and catchy melodies in favour of crafting a deeply nuanced, layered and thickly textured experience that rewards multiple listens in ways that very few other records this year have achieved. So, what else can I say about Aviations' Luminaria? This is most assuredly not a record that I think everyone will enjoy, but is certainly one that I think everyone should at least try, if only to see that technicality and virtuosity with instrumentation does not immediately equate to a soulless, barren husk of music devoid of emotional resonance. What this six-piece have achieved with their third studio album is what can only be described as brightness. The name Luminaria feels extraordinarily appropriate, as this album is a ray of sunshine. It's the soft glow of the morning sun just before it breaches the horizon and dazzles you. It is a complex album, guarded of its secrets and its treasures, content to make the listener go digging for the rewards that they're looking for. And while this might make it a slightly frustrating experience in the early stages of listening to this one, I can guarantee you that this is worth sticking with, because when the key to that lock finally clicks and you open this one up, it's amongst the most dazzling releases of 2023. My recommendation is a cautious one to pick this one up in physical format. It's not likely to be immediately enjoyable, but if you're a fan of that kind of late-era contortionist variety of progressive metal, and you've been craving something new since Clairvoyant, then Luminaria will absolutely scratch that itch, and then some. This is all, of course, guys, just my opinion, as you know, so if you have listened to Luminaria, please tell me what you thought about this record in the comments down below. If you did like this video, please do share it around with anyone else who you think would possibly enjoy it, and please do consider subscribing to the channel for more content. I'm going to leave my link tree down below, where you'll find all the places to find me on social media, as well as a link to my Ko-fi page if you're feeling particularly generous and want to help support the channel. But until next time, guys, as always, keep your rhyme signatures extremely odd.